I always knew they didn't see me. Not really. To them, I was just the quiet one. The helper. The one who always made space so others could shine. But I never expected that one day, the very people I called family would go so far as to destroy everything I'd built. I'm Elena Marquez. On paper, I'm the director of systems at Chirogen Biotech in San Diego. In truth, I own the damn company, and they had no idea, not my parents, not my sister, not my cousins. No one knew the truth, and they thought they were coming for my job. No, they were walking straight into a boardroom I controlled. Before we get to how I pulled this off, you need to understand who I was to them. My older sister, Rhea, was the golden child. Loud, charismatic, always the center of attention at holidays. She went to a mid-tier college and dropped out twice. Still, my parents paid for her to travel for inspiration, while I hustled through an Ivy League program, with 3 scholarships and a night job. I built algorithmic prototypes in the back of a used bookstore. Rhea posted selfies with captions like "manifesting the boss life." Every time I won a fellowship, she got a spa day. When I built my first medical software tool at 24, they said, "It's cute that you're keeping busy." So I stopped trying to convince them. I kept my head down, funneled every dollar I made into shell companies, blind trusts, and a holding firm I called Odyssey Ventrix. No one looked twice at a name like that. Over 7 years, I bought into Chirogen from the bottom, acquiring fractional stakes from early investors, buying out retiring board members, and disguising every move through layers of legal shields. By the time I was hired into a director-level role, I already owned 67% of the company's voting shares. But I played it quiet, let them think I was just another up-and-comer working under someone else's vision. Rhea couldn't stand it. The moment I posted about my new position, just a vague LinkedIn update about joining an exciting new chapter, she started sniffing around. First it was random calls to my coworkers, then lunch meetings with people on my team. "She means well," my mom said. "She just wants to see what you do." But I saw right through her. She wasn't curious, she was casing the place, looking for cracks, and when she found none, she made her own. 2 weeks later, HR received an anonymous package, allegations of falsified credentials, claims I'd plagiarized my senior thesis, a tip about a mysterious overseas transaction, implying I was embezzling from a past employer. The whole thing was fiction, elaborate, but false. But what rattled me wasn't the attack itself. It was the realization, my sister wasn't just jealous, she was willing to destroy me professionally to stay on top. The sad part, my parents encouraged it. "Maybe it's a misunderstanding," Dad muttered when I confronted him. "Rhea just wants to help guide you." I didn't argue, I just nodded and started documenting everything. Because if they were willing to take it this far, they deserved to know exactly who they were dealing with. And I wasn't done being quiet, I was just getting started. By the time the second anonymous report hit HR, I knew Rhea was escalating. This one was even more desperate. Claims that I'd bribed a department head to approve faulty drug trial data. She included doctored spreadsheets and screenshots pulled from some dark corner of the internet. Amateur-level forgery, but persuasive enough to raise eyebrows. And still, I said nothing. Let them whisper, let her think I was cornered, because every time she moved, she told me exactly what she feared, that I might actually be better than her. I spent my evenings piecing together a case of my own. Every message Rhea had sent to my coworkers. Every offhand comment she made during office lunches. Even the ones she thought were innocent. I had a timeline. I had witnesses. I had audio. Chirogen was a biotech firm. Sure, but what we did better than anything was data, and I had data on everything down to the moment she slipped into the CEO's private gala last month and pretended to be part of the executive team. I had photos of her laughing with my board members, telling them I was struggling to adapt and likely wouldn't last the year. The final blow came from an email accidentally forwarded to me by an intern. It was a chain between Rhea and 2 of her friends, both freelancers, talking about the plan. She wanted to collect enough dirt to force the board to fire me, then slide in as a rescue candidate for a new PR role they were creating. She even pitched herself as a family-friendly, media-polished face for the company's next funding round. My own sister was angling to steal the empire I had built in secret. I read that email 3 times, heart pounding. Then I printed it, slid it into a folder and locked it away, let her keep digging her grave. At home it was business as usual. Our parents were hosting a Sunday brunch to celebrate Rhea's new business venture, some half-baked e-commerce brand She was launching with money from Mom's retirement account. She barely made eye contact with me, but when she did, it was like she'd already won. "You look tired, Elena," she said sweetly. "Working too hard? You know stress really messes with judgment. You should be careful about that." Mom chuckled. Dad nodded. I just smiled. "You're right," I said calmly. "Sometimes you need pressure to see who cracks." That night I sent my first encrypted message to Gyrogen's board of directors. It was simple, a request for an emergency session to address internal sabotage concerns. No names, no accusations, just a warning, more details to follow. I knew it would set off alarms, and that's exactly what I wanted. Because the more attention I pulled toward the issue, the more likely it was that Ria would push harder. She still thought she had the upper hand. She didn't realize I had every piece already in place. She thought I was reacting, but I'd already won. She just hadn't read the rules, because I was the one who wrote them. The board meeting was set for 9 a.m. sharp. I could feel the tension building all week. My inbox flooded with messages from the executives, all demanding clarification, wanting to know why unverified reports were circulating. I smiled at my screen, knowing Ria was somewhere, just out of reach, thinking I was the one who'd be on trial. She had no idea what I had planned. I spent the entire night reviewing the evidence. Every document, every piece of communication, nothing was left to chance. I wanted to be sure. If she wanted to go after me, she was about to learn a very hard lesson about how ruthless I could be. Around midnight, I finalized everything. A neatly organized dossier, packed with irrefutable proof. Alongside it, I attached one simple request. For the board's consideration, dismissal of all allegations and an immediate review of the situation with Miss Ria Marquette. By 4 a.m., I felt the familiar calm that always settled over me before big moves. I shut down my laptop, packed my things, and prepared for what would be the most important meeting of my life. But before I left, I checked my phone one last time. There it was, a message from my mom. "You know, you've always been the strong one. I don't get why you don't let Ria help more. You know, we just want you to be happy, sweetheart." I stared at the screen for a moment. The words help and happy felt like a cruel joke. They wanted me to be happy, yet they couldn't see the truth right in front of them. It was never about my happiness. It was about them choosing sides, and I was always the one left behind. I locked my phone and turned to the mirror. "Time to show them who I really am," I whispered. The drive to Gyrogen felt like a dream. I was calm, too calm. I replayed my sister's smug face, the look in my parents' eyes when they thought they had won. Every word they said echoed in my mind. "You'll never make it. It's too big for you." I wasn't just making it, I was about to tear their entire illusion down. At 7:45 a.m., I stepped into the lobby of Gyrogen, coffee in hand, feeling like I was stepping onto the battlefield. The lobby buzzed with executives, chatting nervously, looking over their notes, but I wasn't nervous. I was prepared. And as the clock ticked closer to 9:02, I felt the weight of my strategy fall into place. Ria was about to walk into a storm she couldn't outrun. She arrived at 8:45, and when she walked through the doors, I could see her flanked by Mom and Dad, both dressed in their Sunday best, glowing with misplaced confidence. They had no idea that the moment they sat in that boardroom, their world would be turned upside down. My assistant, Mina, had already made sure they were greeted with the very best hospitality. I watched her from the second-floor office, a quiet observer. Ria didn't even glance up as she passed by. She was too busy talking about how I was in over my head, and how the company needed someone with real leadership. She didn't see the calm in my eyes, but I saw the cracks in hers. She was worried, I could tell, and worry makes people sloppy. By the time the clock struck 9 hours, I stood and straightened my jacket. This was my moment. I could feel it in my bones. As I walked down the hallway past my sister, past my parents, and into that conference room, I wasn't just stepping into a meeting, I was stepping into the future. As I entered the boardroom, the air shifted, the room fell silent, the hum of quiet conversation grinding to a halt. All eyes turned to me as I stepped confidently to the head of the table, my chair waiting for me as if it were my rightful place. Jasmine, sitting at the far end with her arms folded, couldn't hide the shock that flashed across her face. It was only for a second, but it was enough. "Ava," she spat, her voice tight with disdain. "This is a closed session. You weren't invited." I smiled as I took my seat, unfazed by her words. Actually, I said calmly, folding my hands, I invited myself. I turned to face the room of directors. I'm afraid it's rather difficult to conduct a board meeting about the future of the company without the owner in the room, don't you think? The silence was deafening. I glanced around the table. One by one, the directors processed the unexpected shift in power. Some blinked in confusion, while others looked at me with sudden recognition. Jasmine's face, once smug and composed, drained of all color. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. I don't know what this is about, she stammered, attempting to recover her composure. You can't just— Oh, but I can, I interrupted smoothly, pulling a sleek leather portfolio from Mina's hand. Skyvera was publicly traded until 2 months ago. I quietly acquired controlling interest in the company, and now, it's mine. The room seemed to shrink. One of the directors, a seasoned veteran with gray hair and a permanent frown, gasped. The others leaned forward, eager to see where this was going. Jasmine looked like she might faint. No, this has to be some kind of joke, she managed, her voice shaking. The shareholders would have known. Not unless you were part of the cover-up, Jasmine, I replied, with a cold smile. Which I suspect you were. I turned to Mina, who tapped a few commands on her tablet. The room filled with the sound of Jasmine's own voice. I told you. Jasmine's voice echoed around the room. She's not cut out for leadership. She might be smart, but she crumbles under pressure. They'll see that soon enough. The room froze. And there's more, I continued, letting the words sink in. Honestly, she's only in that role because of quotas. If we're being real, I'm sure it was all about diversity. She doesn't belong there. I glanced at Jasmine, who was now visibly shaking. Her hands were pressed against the table, but they trembled so violently that they almost looked as if they would give way. Her face, once full of triumph, now reflected panic. She opened her mouth to argue, but the words got caught in her throat. The directors looked at one another, some of them uncomfortable, but none of them able to take their eyes off the screen now displaying her betrayal. I let the silence stretch for a moment longer before I pulled out the envelope. The same one Jasmine had secretly delivered to the board. I flipped it open and tossed the fake financial records onto the table. You thought you could set me up with these, but you didn't expect me to be prepared, I said softly. You didn't expect me to see through your lies. Jasmine's smug confidence had completely vanished. The board members sat motionless as I exposed every detail, falsified emails, doctored spreadsheets, and a clear trail of manipulation. I was protecting the company, Jasmine whispered, her voice cracking as she tried to hold on to what little dignity she had left. Protecting it? I scoffed. You were destroying it, Jasmine. You were trying to tear down everything I've worked for, and for what? Because you thought you deserved my seat at the table? I stood up, taking the envelope and sliding it across the table to the director in charge. Take a look. This is everything. The fake claims, the forged documents, the attempt to sabotage me at every turn. Jasmine's mouth opened and closed, but there were no words left to speak. I turned back to the directors. Do you have any more questions? I asked calmly, letting the weight of her deception settle in. The meeting room had grown cold. No one spoke. The power had shifted, permanently. The room was thick with tension as I let the silence hang in the air. The documents, the recordings, and every shred of evidence I had meticulously gathered sat in front of the board, exposing Jasmine for who she truly was. For a moment, I allowed myself a quiet satisfaction. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about vindication. It was about taking control of my own story for once, rewriting it the way I should have from the start. Jasmine sat at the far end of the table, visibly crumbling under the weight of her lies. The confident facade she'd carefully constructed over the years had evaporated, leaving nothing but desperation behind. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but her words were lost in a sea of disbelief and shame. I watched her, the sister who had once thought she could erase me, who had spent years trying to outshine me, now completely exposed. What do you want, Jasmine? I asked, my voice low and deliberate. What is it that you were hoping to achieve with all of this? Her eyes, once full of pride and ambition, now shone with a mixture of guilt and fear. She tried to gather herself, but it was no use. The facade had cracked completely. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted to be seen. To prove I was better than you. I leaned forward, fixing her with a steady gaze. Better than me? I echoed, a soft laugh escaping my lips. Jasmine, you were never better than me, you just had the privilege of being seen. You had the attention, the applause, the admiration. But I built everything you see here from the ground up. You tried to tear me down because you couldn't stand being in the shadow of someone who had earned everything they had. She looked away, unable to meet my gaze, but I wasn't finished. I'm not the person you thought I was. And you, I said, pointing at the folder on the table. You will learn that there's a price to be paid when you betray someone who has always played by the rules, even when no one was watching. The board members exchanged glances, some visibly uncomfortable, others shocked into silence. The reality of what Jasmine had done was settling in, and no one was willing to speak up for her. No one could. Not now. I turned to face the board. It's clear that Jasmine has crossed a line that cannot be ignored. The legal and ethical breaches are too severe to overlook. I request immediate action. Elas Romero, the chair of the board, cleared his throat, his face pale. We will convene an emergency session, he said, his voice strained. But I can't ignore the gravity of these allegations. We'll have to take action, and it won't be pretty. I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. Jasmine's attempt to destroy me, to undermine everything I had worked for, had only led to her own downfall. She had handed me the power to expose her, and now I was the one in control. But there was more to do. Jasmine, I said coldly, you've lost more than just your job today. Your actions have compromised everything. I'm moving forward with a formal complaint to your employer, detailing every forged document, every lie you've spread about me. You will be held accountable for everything you've done. Jasmine recoiled as if I had slapped her, her eyes wide with fear. You can't do this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Please, Elena, don't destroy me. But I wasn't listening. I had already made my decision. She wasn't just going to lose her job, she was going to lose everything. The career she had spent years building, the reputation she had carefully crafted. It would all come crashing down. She had made her move, and now it was time for me to make mine. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Jasmine's world crumbled quickly. She was let go from her job after the board's emergency session, and as I had promised, the full dossier was sent to her current employer. Her social media accounts, once filled with polished photos of her success, were quickly overshadowed by the scandal. The corporate world, so eager to cheer her on, turned its back as soon as the truth came to light. Her friends, her colleagues, everyone who once admired her, began to distance themselves. The illusion she'd created had shattered beyond repair. But me? I stayed quiet. I didn't need to say a word. I didn't need to gloat or revel in her misery. Jasmine had already done that for me. The truth was now out there, and no matter how much she tried to fight it, no one could ignore what she had done. 3 months passed, and Skyvera Labs was thriving. Not only had I gained control of the company, but I had managed to steer it into new territory. We were about to launch our most ambitious product to date, a revolutionary energy solution that would disrupt the industry. My vision was becoming a reality. The board, once skeptical, now looked to me for direction, and my team, those who had always believed in me, stood by my side. One evening after a long strategy session, Mina buzzed in. There's someone here, says it's personal. I didn't even need to ask who it was. I knew. It was Jasmine. I braced myself as she walked into my office. She looked different, smaller, worn down. Her once impeccable wardrobe was replaced with plain clothes. No makeup, no jewelry, just a woman who had finally lost everything. She was no longer the confident, arrogant woman who had tried to ruin me. She was broken. I'm not staying, she said softly, holding up a manila envelope. I just needed to say something. She placed it on my desk. I looked up at her, waiting for her to continue. Her eyes, though empty, seemed to search mine for some kind of redemption, some hint of forgiveness, but I had none to offer. Not yet. This has everything, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Old passwords, contacts, everything I used to sabotage you. I'm also sending statements to the board and my former company. No spin, no excuses. I don't expect anything from you, but letting me fall, letting me sink, that taught me more than all the years Mom and Dad spent lifting me up. She turned toward the door. Wait, I said, my voice surprising me. Why now? She hesitated before replying, her voice filled with quiet remorse. Because you were right, Elena. I wasn't building anything. I hated you for it. I hated you for being so quiet, for succeeding without needing anyone's validation. I wanted it all. But now, I see what I was really doing, and I want to start over. A long silence passed between us. The woman standing before me was no longer the one who had tried to tow me. She was simply a person who had learned, perhaps too late, the price of her actions. I'm starting over, she said, her voice a mixture of shame and acceptance. I'll be working at a new startup, no fake titles, no pretending, just starting over. I nodded. Send me your resume in a year, I said gently. Not for leadership, I added, but if you're serious about earning your place the right way, we're always looking for people willing to start from the ground up. She looked at me, her eyes softening for a brief moment. A single tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't say anything more, just nodded and turned, leaving without another word. As the door clicked shut behind her, I sat back in my chair, staring out at the city lights. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Jasmine had tried to destroy me, to tear down everything I had worked for, but in the end, it was her own arrogance, her own bitterness, that led to her downfall. And me, I had come out stronger. Skyvera Labs continued to grow, surpassing even my most ambitious projections. My parents reached out occasionally, but their calls were now only for favors, or to brag about their visionary daughter at social events. I kept it civil but distant. As I sat in my office, looking out over the city, I thought back to everything I'd been through, how I had been underestimated, overlooked, and even betrayed by those closest to me. But I had risen above it all, and that was the real victory. Jasmine sent me one last message. A simple card, no guilt, no plea, just a note that read, "You didn't succeed because of us. You succeeded in spite of us. I'm finally learning how to build for real." I smiled softly, my heart finally at peace. Maybe she would, in time, but for now, the game was over. And I had won.